Good morning, everyone. It is Wednesday, March the 25th, and welcome to 7Investing Live. This is our live stream event we host every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 10 a.m. Eastern Time to spotlight several of the stock market's most intriguing opportunities. My name is Simon Erickson. I'm the founder and CEO of 7Investing. I encourage you to come check out our own website, 7investing.com, if you'd like to see all of our long-term stock market recommendations and our monthly best buys. We publish all of those. Your first 7 days are absolutely free and with zero upfront costs. So come check out 7investing.com and 7investing.com/subscribe if you'd like to start up your new 7Investing membership today. This has been an interesting series. This is part 2 of an ongoing series we've had as we're looking forward to what the next big thing is going to be what the next big growth style investments perhaps are going to be. And one of the things we've been looking at here has been the MIT Tech Review's 10 breakthrough technologies. This is something that they publish every single year. I followed it for more than a decade now, actually in person for a lot of this, right there on campus. But I'm always intrigued at what is it that's getting on stage with, the PhDs and the postdocs, the people doing this great academic research that they think is going to have an impact that will apply to society at large, global scale, really big breakthrough technologies. And the interesting part of this is that this is an academic exercise. A lot of this is not commercialized or even generating any revenue at the time that it's being discussed. These are scientific innovations, but they do later bleed into the commercial markets and the enterprise, and then, of course, to us as publicly traded companies that we can invest in. And so I'm always very interested to see what's on the breakthrough technologies list, and let's start thinking out 3 to 4 to 5 years in the future of what could be the next big thing. And so in part 1, we reviewed the previous lists of the most recent 3 years, 2023, 2024, and 2025. And we saw that some of these remained in kind of the science project or, neat innovation phase, but some also went on to become commercially popular and even have publicly traded companies that were built around those. And so we're now in part 2 of this series. We will have a part 3 on Friday's show. But here in part 2, I want to look deeper at the list that came out for the 10 breakthrough technologies for 2026. And I've forced ranked them from number 10 all the way up to number 1 on which of these appears to be the most investable over the next 3 to 5 years. I'm going to put that list up here. Heather, I want to bring you into this conversation too as I hopefully share my screen and allow everybody to see the list that we're looking at right now, because we did talk about this last time. It's kind of a fun one. Let me see. Here it is. Apologies for the short delay. But here's the list that we had of the previous years. 2023, 2024, and 2025. And then we had, a couple that I think stood out, whether that was AI for image generation. We're using that all the time now. Risk-V, AI for everything, weight loss drugs, robotaxis, and small language models. But then we came to the list here in 2026. And Heather, on the last show, we picked out a couple of these that we thought might be interesting. We haven't talked about this beforehand. I'm putting you on the spot here. But out of these 10 that are listed on the screen right now, are there maybe 2 or 3 that you would think would score highly in terms of investability over the next 3 to 5 years?
Yes. Let's see. Next gen nuclear. I feel like that's one I'm already trying to invest in. Hyperscale AI data centers. And let's see. Generative coding / AI companions. That's all just kind of coming in. Hyperscale AI data centers. They're all kind of the same world as honestly our next gen nuclear of we're trying to get AI going. So let's do something else. I think the gene editing is just a really interesting, it's hitting here 3 times. And I think that is just an interesting base technology that maybe would be good to try to get investing in.
That is a good list, Heather. We're going to jump in here in a minute, but for anybody who's watching, just to make a little bit of a game out of this, make it a little bit fun, we've got the 10 breakthrough technologies in no particular order here listed for 2026. And again, I'm going to jump in a minute here and put my own rankings. Of course, this is all subjective, but in terms of what I think is going to be the most impactful for stock market investors. So Heather, we'll see how you do. We'll see if you pick the right ones. We're going to jump in. Here we're going to go number 10, first and foremost. To be continued, continued today. Got some question marks around this. What is number 10? Number 10, in my opinion, is gene resurrection. This is something that gained popularity when they displayed an image of a dire wolf that was shown, and actually it was from some sleuthing and some detective work, realized that this was actually just a genetically engineered gray wolf. Oh goodness, I think I lost my screen here, Heather. Maybe there, perfect, thank you. But basically, what this was is a modern day gray wolf that had a DNA sequence implanted, engineered into it from the dire wolf, which has been extinct for 10,000 years. And the idea here is exactly like you've gotten familiar with in Jurassic Park, where, if you're introducing DNA sequences from a DNA bank into modern animals, what could possibly go wrong? We saw Jurassic Park, nothing went wrong, right? This is totally safe. But the idea maybe isn't to bring back velociraptors, but there could be ways to engineer crops. We've already seen gene-modified crops, genetically modified organisms. Could you also bring in new DNA sequences that could make them more resistant to climate change? There are huge uncertainties on what's going to happen from this. There was a reason that evolution chose to remove certain genes from those plants, animals, or even ancestors of ours that didn't make it to present day. Why was that? Why did it choose to have those genes removed? We don't know yet, and we don't know the long-term side effects from things like this. But we do know that Colossal Biosciences is a company that's working on this, as is Twist Bioscience. That is a publicly traded company with the ticker TWST. Is actually working on 3D printing synthetic DNA that can be used for these types of applications. So this one, gene resurrection, kind of neat. It seems more like a science project than something that's investable to me today. I put this at number 10 out of 10 on the list in terms of investability. Moving on, number 9, commercial space stations. Wow, this is cool. Okay, space tourism used to be just kind of, you'd go on a short-term ride that lasted for an hour and you were in zero gravity for a couple of minutes, right? Virgin Galactic was working on things like this versus Richard Branson's company. But this is now evolving from a very short-term ride to a longer-term stay onto something that would be similar as the International Space Station. In fact, NASA has already granted $500 million to commercial enterprises to develop private space stations. A company called Vast Space is already launching or expected to launch its Haven 1 space station in 2027. This would be used for scientific research up front. It would initially support 4 people to stay on that for up to 10 days in zero gravity out in orbit of the Earth. There are other companies such as Axiom Space and Voyager Space that want to have boutique hotels. They're in orbit in outer space by the year 2028. And Blue Origin, of course, that's Jeff Bezos' company, is planning for the orbital reef in 2030. You are not reading this incorrectly. You can go on a tourist trip to a space hotel within 3 years, in theory. These will cost tens of millions of dollars per person. There is early support not only from Jeff Bezos, but also from Elon Musk, who, of course, has a certain interest in this because his SpaceX rockets will be launching these into orbit. So I think that SpaceX and Blue Origin are 2 companies to watch. Of course, those other companies mentioned, Vast Space, Axiom Space, and Voyage Space, some interesting ones as well. Heather, if the money was not an issue, would you take a trip into outer space and trust yourself to stay in a space hotel for 10 days?
Maybe. All I can think about is the employees who are going to work at these luxury hotels and how wild that is. And just like the sheer logistics, there we go, of trying to make this happen, because you lose bone density while you're in space. You're going to have to cycle these people out constantly. This is a logistic nightmare, but I mean, it doesn't mean it won't happen. I wouldn't be on the first shuttle for sure. But yeah, eventually, if money wasn't an issue, although I do think that money could be much better put to use here on Earth, so probably not, but it would be kind of cool.
I
What about
agree.
you? Would you go up?
I don't think I would. I think I'd like to tell myself I would, but that seems like a little too much for me, I think. But, Virgin Galactic, Branson was oversubscribed, for the original list of it when he was wanting to do these, and it fell through. It didn't work out, but the list of a limited capacity was oversubscribed with people that wanted to pay tens of millions of dollars to do this. Still interesting, but I don't think it's investable just quite yet. Number 8, base edited babies. This is interesting because we're now seeing base editing therapies that are used to create problems that are already in the human genome. In fact, there was a 7-month-old up in Pennsylvania that had a faulty genetic condition in his liver. They used a base edited therapy to give a personalized treatment for him to be able to remove the ammonia that's in his blood. The procedure probably saved his life. And it was opposed to a liver transplant, which cost $1 million. It was about the same cost, but he didn't have to wait for a donor to be available. In fact, it's expected that the cost of this will probably decline to about 50% or less within a few years. We always say that no matter what scientific innovation it is, you expect scale is going to kick in there. But base editing therapies, as opposed to gene edited therapies, are a specific and singular base pair. We're not correcting entire genes where we're knocking them out and replacing them in the DNA helix. We're actually replacing individual DNA base pairs. So these can be much more personalized and much more specific on exactly what we're correcting. This could be useful for not only singular gene issues in the genome, things like sickle cell disease, but again, these personalized kind of therapies like this liver condition, which is very specific for this 7-month-old up in the Northeast. And again, these are very useful for extreme conditions, but again, they're kind of prohibitive in cost. They don't have any kind of FDA recommendation or approval for anything like this. I think they're very interesting and, of course, very important because there are lives at stake on things like this. But in terms of being investable, I think we're still more than 3 to 5 years out for this. Therapeutics is a publicly traded company that's leading the charge on base editing. There's even individual within the base pair itself. You can even do prime editing, which is an even further evolution of this technology, which is being pursued by Prime Medicine, another publicly traded PRME for that one. And then Verve Therapeutics is also working on this as well. This is an interesting one. I really love the scientific outcomes from it. I question whether or not we're ever going to get economical enough, at least as the initial projections would be recommended. Number 7, moving on, sodium-ion batteries. If you have a cell phone, it probably has a lithium-ion battery in it right now. Lithium is kind of challenging to mine and to move around the world. Sometimes it's in locations you don't want to be needing to mine from, but sodium is much more plentiful. In fact, sodium is 1,000 times more abundant than lithium on the planet Earth. The batteries that are sodium ion right now are at about cost parity, at least on the low end of it. They're generally considered to cost $130 to $150 per kilowatt hour that is produced of energy, compared to $100 per kilowatt hour for lithium ion. Lithium ion is more at scale, so it's cheaper today, but it's generally expected that sodium ion batteries would reach about half of that cost, perhaps down to $40 per kilowatt hour. Lithium has got safety concerns. They blow up. Anyone who saw the Teslas that were exploding in parking lots is aware of that. Sodium does not have that concern. They're much safer, and they're expected to be cheaper and even perform better in cold environments, cold temperatures. But again, lithium has got a much, much higher energy density. It's the world's lightest metal, so you can pack more and more charge for a longer period of time. Great for cell phones, great for electric vehicles. These high-end applications that can support higher prices are probably going to stay with lithium ion, but there might be applications that could be cheaper, and the safety concerns or the plentifulness, the availability of the supply of sodium would make them much more better fit for things like this. And so companies like CATL and BYD, these are both Chinese automakers and electronics makers. They're trying to create more mass market affordable vehicles that maybe are not as high end as a Tesla, but could be affordable for large people at a lower price. And then in terms of industrial, power production, there's companies like Natron Energy or Peak Energy here in the United States that are pursuing sodium-ion batteries as well. Neat applications. It's not going to be at the high end of the market, but it is something that's interesting.
Can I ask you a question about these?
Sure.
So because they don't have the energy density, they're just going to have to be larger for the same amount of energy capacity, right?
That would be the equivalent statement, is that if your cell phone today is this large because it's using lithium ion, if you wanted to have the same charge, it would be much larger and much heavier if it was using sodium.
And so if you did sodium in a car, which it sounds like some of these are trying to do, you can't go huge, so you're just going to have a much more limited range in said car.
100% correct.
Which for a city commuter car might be fine, especially if it could be massively cheaper. But would these be something that would be used for like power storage, like power plant storage, like for solar systems or for wind? Would that be a feasible option for these if they get significantly cheaper?
100%.
Okay.
Absolutely. Wouldn't carry the same charge, doesn't have the same energy density, but that's exactly what some of these energy companies are looking for, is energy storage within the United States, industrial.
Okay, cool.
So, okay, moving on to number 6, as the list gets closer to the top here, we've got embryo scoring. This is an interesting one, another scientific innovation. Genetic testing on embryos is already being done right now to screen and diagnose serious diseases. This is prenatal testing. This is things where you can test for things like Down syndrome, in a baby right before they're born. We're already doing that. We're already screening for things like that. That's something that's happened with genomic testing that we've done. Non-invasive prenatal testing is being done today, but this is also being expanded to assess other information that's also stored in the DNA. Not just conditions like this, but perhaps the appearance of your child, perhaps their behavior, perhaps their intelligence. This can all be attributed to specific genes within the genome, within a baby's DNA. And the question is, how much of this do we really want to know? This is kind of controversial, right? First of all, it's very expensive. There are things called pre-implantation genetic tests, especially for polygenic disorders, that not just a single gene, but the interaction between multiple or polygenes, to test for disorders, or even traits now. These types of tests are costing $50,000 per person right now. Already very controversial. Eugenics is a controversial topic out there. Are we screening out the most intelligent or the best traits and forgetting about the ones that don't have those? What would a parent do if they don't like the outcome of how intelligent or the behavior of their baby? Are they going to try to change that in some way? There's a lot of questions that are not answered, that are very ethical in nature related to this. But it is worth pointing out that pre-implantation genetic testing is already being offered in 100 fertility clinics across the country. This is something that is being done at a very small scale today. It could unlock a lot of other things, but there are companies working on this. Genomic Prediction is working on it. ORCID, that says ORC there, that should be ORCID, Heresite, and Nucleus Genomics. A couple companies that are kind of interested in this. Again, expanding this from polygenic testing, which was just used for disorders and conditions, and now kind of opening up Pandora's box of screening for a whole lot of other things out.
That one's really, really cool when used for health and quality of life, but really spooky and just science fiction nightmare. Like, we've read these books, y'all. Like,
yes.
And yeah, getting really into eugenics, and it's just very disconcerting. But great if you're protecting children and increasing quality of life of kids that are
the AI on it is amazing too, Heather. I mean, like, if you can kind of do the progression that will show you what your kid before they're even born is going to look like as a teenager, and maybe even predicting what their behavior is going to be and things like this. I mean, it's almost like a glimpse into the future, whether or not you want that.
You do have to wonder, just like, so many outliers in history who have done great things have been like maybe not the genetic perfect human. And it's like, are we just going to start removing these? I don't know. There's a lot to be said here that is very strange and concerning.
I wouldn't want to know. If my parents ever did this on me, I wouldn't even want to know what the report says. I just let me do my thing, and you guys can keep that to yourselves. Number 5. Oh my goodness. Here's our favorite one, Heather. The one that's the hardest to pronounce of the entire list. I'm going to try it again this time. Interpretability. Interpretability. I'm never gonna completely get that. It's as close as I'm gonna get.
I can't get it either. Neither of us can.
MI refers to mapping the pathways of a large language model and all the billions of parameters that it has to figure out how they work. Why are they functioning the way that they are? Why do they sometimes hallucinate? Why are they giving us inaccurate information? This is similar to the algorithms that Google used back in the late 90s to map out the internet, to map out the interactions of websites and then provide the best results for you in search. This is the same thing of kind of mapping out the pathways of a large language model to make sure it's giving the right answers. And of course, successful outcomes from this would improve the accuracy of the recommendations from AI models, lead to fewer hallucinations, and even improve probably some of the safety and privacy concerns with some new controls for things like this. So Google DeepMind has been doing this already. Anthropic has been working on this with Claude. OpenAI is working on this with GPT. It's kind of an internal project, but it's like using AI to improve the AI. They're willing to spend some pretty significant money on this. I think that's why it ranked number 5 on this list of 10. Can you say it, Heather? Can you show me how to actually pronounce this? I don't know yet.
I had a speech impediment as a kid. Mechanistic interpretability.
That's perfect. You're hired. You're the host of the show. I can't even get it. I can't get that.
I've been practicing.
I'm going to work on this a couple more times at least. Number 4, AI companions. You mentioned this one as one of the interesting ones when we talked about the show last time. This is something that chatbots have evolved. We used to ask them simple transactional questions. When you're on the website, hey, help me find 7Investing's best buys. It gives you a recommendation. Now, these are not only more complex questions, but people are actually forming relationships, sometimes intimate relationships with AI companions out there. In fact, according to a poll that was placed in 2025, 72% of US teenagers admitted to using AI for some form of companionship. Of course, there are risks that arise when something like a GPT, which is an LLM, large language model that's used for general purpose information, is now being used for relationships. That's not how a lot of these were originally intended. They've got to put up some new guardrails to make sure they're giving safe responses if you're being used for these types of purposes. And again, these are kind of beyond their intended scope, but companies are starting to explore these kinds of things. There definitely needs to be clear regulations and limitations. There's already been some unfortunate cases that have happened from this, not only from misinformation. There's been conspiracy theories that now people are starting to believe things that may or may not be completely accurate or true. And there's even been teenage suicides based on some of the conversations that have been had with these AI companions out there. Companies like Character.ai are working specifically on the companion angle of this. And of course, the other large AI model providers like OpenAI and Anthropic are very interested in this as well. Heather, this is such an interesting one. What do you think about AI companions?
I didn't know there had been suicides. That's awful. I think that there's such a loneliness epidemic just in the world. Like, there's so many elderly people that, like, Japan's trying to figure out what to do with their just massive elderly population. And I do think that AI companionship, maybe not like in the romantic sense, to me, I still can't wrap my head around that. I think I am just aging myself as a millennial that I just can't figure that one out. And I do think it's really interesting, but I do think you're right. Like, it needs to be guardrailed and more specific, because we're seeing cases of as AI induced psychosis where people are just like, especially the AI LLMs that are very just positive reinforcement, where they're just like constantly like, oh my gosh, you're right. You're so right. And it's just this constant, telling you how smart you are, how correct you are, and it's never any like negative feedback. And like, that's not great for a human brain. That's why humans shouldn't be surrounded by sycophants, and AI can be the biggest sycophant. And so that's kind of a problem. I mean, we're seeing it being a problem. But I do also see this place that it's really useful to have someone always there to talk to, that's easier to talk to than another person sometimes, or just that is always there for you. And I mean, it's going to happen. Apparently, it's already happening. And so I think it'll be really interesting to watch. And as long as it's built with guardrails and safeties, it just needs to be done right.
100% agree. The people that are fans of this and the people that are very against this both point to mental health. It can be very good if used correctly. It can be very bad if used incorrectly, certainly. And then the birth rate. I mean, the other side of it, people that are against this are saying, how is this going to impact if we actually have companions that aren't going out there and finding human companions anymore? Is this impacting bigger picture things in the world? To be determined. This is something that's brand new, breakthrough for sure. Number 3, next generation nuclear. These are smaller and less expensive nuclear power reactors that are generating power that's often fit for purpose. One of the biggest use cases so far has been the energy and the power required for data centers, which of course are super power hungry. AI takes a lot of power to run. There are nuclear micro reactors. One or a couple of benefits from those is they're always available, not just when the sun is shining or the wind is blowing. And they also are giving off no emissions, right? This is not combustion that is happening from these. There's no carbon output from the reactions themselves. The small modular reactors, which we call SMRs a lot of times, they've already won regulatory approval. Again, energy is a state-based policy, but they have been approved in certain states like Idaho, Tennessee, Utah, even Texas, for certain applications. In addition to small modular reactors, there's other types of what would be considered nuclear power production that would also have alternative coolants. Instead of just water, you can now use molten salt or liquid sodium to pull out the heat much more effectively or efficiently than just using water, which has typically been used for traditional nuclear. These are kind of scaling up there in the demonstration phase right now. But NuScale Power, that's a publicly traded company. SMR is a ticker on that one. Kairos Power, TerraPower, and X Energy are all pursuing this. This is neat. This is something that has been on MIT's list for a long time. I remember them presenting nuclear power. It wasn't always even just nuclear fission, but they've been talking about, can Lawrence Livermore now produce a net power positive fusion reaction? Nuclear fusion, also considered a nuclear reaction. There is a lot going on in the nuclear world right now, whether it's building smaller reactors that are fit for purpose, whether it's making bigger reactors that are going to be powering these AI data centers, or maybe it's even just completely different types of nuclear. This is one that we're calling it a breakthrough technology, but it's kind of been like the breakthrough technology for like 20 or 30 years that just has not gotten around to any kind of commercial scale just yet.
I mean, it's one that we're also just rightfully all a little nervous about. And they are just getting so much safer. And that is a very important part of them, especially from what I've read about the small modular reactors. Just their potential dangers are so much less than the large scale plants. And I mean, I think it's you just talk to a person on the street about this and they're just horrified about the idea of a power plant in their neighborhood, and I get it. It's horrifying, but once you start to really dive in, it's not so bad. And they are safer than that coal power plant, most likely for your health down the road. And it is such a powerful form, that's a pun, of energy production. And they can make so much pretty clean energy, really, if done right. And I'm very interested in this space, and I have been for many years. And so this is definitely one of my top, for the last about 5 years, stocks, areas.
For those who played SimCity, you remember the nuclear reactor was always the most economically the best one, the best option, gave off zero emissions, no pollution until it blew up. But we don't have to worry about a lot of those things at the smaller scale now. Top two, down to the top two. Heather, you nailed them, by the way. I asked you, I put you on the spot. I said, what were the top three going to be? You mentioned next generation nuclear. And then these top two also, you got the same ones that I came up with. Again, we did not plan this. I did not send an envelope that was unsealed before the show. But number two is generative coding. This is AI being used to speed up the production of professional software code, as well as the testing and the debugging of that code as well. It's estimated that at Microsoft, AI is already being used to write 30% of their code. That's amazing. And within Google, it's already 25% or more. Mark Zuckerberg, of course, has publicly stated he wants AI to write, quote, most of Meta's code within the near future. These are big statements from companies that are worth trillions of dollars. Generative coding is a huge deal. If you don't want to do it at such a professional scale where you're doing something that is massive and billion-dollar projects, you do vibe coding. Heather, I think you've done some vibe coding out there. If you're not a professional software developer for a living, you can also go out there and even as a beginner with not a whole lot of computer science experience, at least like myself would be, to develop something like a game or a website or something that you previously would have no idea how to even do the coding from scratch. There are concerns and risks with this. We don't know if AI written code that hasn't been extensively tested yet, it might lead to issues. It might not actually do what it was intended to do. It might not have, the proper code that you would have if you were going through it line by line with a fine-tooth comb. But one impact that might be negative from this too is that we're seeing a lot fewer entry-level positions, especially computer scientists graduating out of college. That was probably the most popular degree when I graduated from college. It almost, a lot of those jobs just don't exist anymore because you can have one person doing the work of 10 today. younger job seekers are having a tough time finding entry-level positions because, as we already know, AI is replacing those human jobs. Companies to watch, we just mentioned Microsoft, Alphabet, and Meta Platforms, but really any big tech company that's running code right now is looking at AI to do it more efficiently. And then the final one, the last one, we talked about this a million times, Heather. Hyperscale AI data centers. Anyone who's been following this story just knows how big of a deal this is. It might not be the sexiest topic. You start talking about infrastructure and data centers, you might start falling back in your chair, your eyes glaze over how boring this is, until you see the magnitude of these numbers and just how big of an impact this is making, not just on the world as a breakthrough technology, but also for us as investors. This has to be number one in terms of the investable opportunity on this list. There are now supercomputers that are running large language models at scale. They're using sophisticated, customized ASIC chips and very complex infrastructure to do this. This is a lot of not just the computing itself, but the supporting functions as well, the networking that's being done, the cooling systems that are being used, the HVAC systems, the power transformation, all of these things that are going into AI data centers that are costing $50 billion or more to construct. A couple examples of the world's largest supercomputers today: xAI's Colossus that was built in Tennessee. That was what it was being used to train Grok and also return the responses that you're getting from Grok. This has got 200,000 of NVIDIA's GPUs powering it right now, and it's using 500 megawatts of power. That's about the same power output of the entire city of San Diego right now, used by one project by one company in Tennessee. It doesn't stop there. Musk further expects to scale this to be 4 times as large as it is today, up to 2 gigawatts of power consumption. Mark Zuckerberg has already announced the Hyperion project for Meta Platforms that will be in Louisiana in the future and would scale up to 5 gigawatts of power consumption. A reminder, the largest nuclear power plant in America is in Georgia and is producing about 4 gigawatts of combined power output. These are massive projects that are going to require a massive amount of power consumption for them and a massive amount of infrastructure spending to make them happen. X.com is one company to watch. Meta Platforms, Alphabet, those are kind of companies we've said for the previous 3 or 4 slides because they're the big spenders in terms of tech companies and the infrastructure, but also Broadcom. We've mentioned this on several times on our show. Ticker on that AVGO is providing a lot of those the technology IP, the complex networking, all of the things that are being done within the data center, the fit for purpose applications that are being used just to transfer information within the data center itself. These are absolutely massive projects. This is an absolutely massive investing trend. Anyone who's invested in NVIDIA or AMD or any of these tech infrastructure plays has done quite well for themselves in the last few years. I do not see that slowing down over the next 5 years. Hyperscale AI data centers has to be the number one breakthrough technology in terms of an investable opportunity within the next 3 years. Heather, any thoughts on this one as we wrap up the list?
Those numbers are just so wild. Man, I bought NVIDIA so long ago.
Good job. Congratulations.
Best performance stock. Man, I bought it $20 a share. Things went well. These are just so... The entire cities in a single data center, like of power use, is just so interesting. And the fact that, I'm glad they're building them out. And, Tennessee, there's a lot of extra power in Tennessee and hopefully in Louisiana as well. You probably know Louisiana a little bit better than I do. I live in the data corridor of Northern Virginia, and it's just, that's all we're building. It's just everywhere you go, there's data centers being built up. And not sure why, because I don't feel like we actually have that much, our power bills are something else. But I mean, this definitely is the future, and it's just everyone is building them, but not these hyperscales here. And these are getting built as their own cities. And I don't know, it just blows my mind. And we've definitely we've shown that graphic so many times of what goes into these data centers and all the other things to invest in as part of these, because it's not just the chips, it's every aspect of the cooling, the everything else.
100%. It's worth digging deeper into. And I'm so glad for that we're going to have a part 3 of the show to dig deeper into these top 3 opportunities. Number 3, next generation nuclear. We're going to put a little bit more attention on new scale power on Friday's show. That is SMR is the ticker on that one. Generative coding. We're going to talk a little bit about that and the AI data centers. I think I'm going to couple those together. And I'd like to talk a little bit more about Broadcom. But I'd also like to talk about a company called Lumentum, who is working on a lot of the transceivers and the lasers that are being used for sending information, converting the electrical signals to optical signals to transfer information more efficiently across the data centers as well. So we'll talk about Broadcom, Lumentum, and NewScale on Friday's show as we wrap up our 3-part series on the 10 breakthrough technologies for 2026. Again, a thanks to the MIT Tech Review, who always does a fantastic job on this list. Some great research that comes out with that. I always like to hop right on top of that every time it comes out every year and make sense of it from the investing perspective as we're trying to size up and find the next great growth style opportunities like NVIDIA, like Heather bought NVIDIA back at $20 a share. So stay tuned. We'll be back again on Friday again to talk about those 3 companies a little bit more in detail. We'll talk a little bit more about the operational and financial aspects as opposed to just the science and the technology like we focused on the first 2 parts of this. But this is a fun series. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, and I love talking about what's going on out there and what's innovative. So stay tuned. Again, today, March 25th, we'll be back again on Friday. In the meantime, stay safe out there. I hope you have a wonderful week.